I'm so glad to be able to join you for this very important conference, Just Sustainability, Hope for the Commons. The commons are the source of hope because it's only when we realize that this beautiful planet is our common home for the good of all and the well-being of all, not just of all humans, but all beings on this planet, all species on this planet, all ecosystems of the planet. That's where hope is cultivated. Hope is cultivated both in resisting the enclosures of our commons and rebuilding them. Our atmospheric commons, which has been enclosed first through pollution and now through the continued denial of climate change, as well as creating new tricks of further privatizing the atmosphere through emissions trading, through pretending that we can appropriate nature's functions on Wall Street through financialization. The place to recover the commons of the atmosphere is for each of us to take the steps that allow the reduction of emissions. I wrote Soil Not Oil because agriculture had been left out of most of the discussions and negotiations on climate change. And it is so clear that 40% of all greenhouse gases are emitted from an industrialized and globalized model of agriculture. Doing organic farming, building local food systems, increasing organic matter in soils, these are the ways to reclaim the atmospheric commons. But they also help us reclaim the commons of the soil, because the erosion of the soil is the single biggest determinant of the devastation of civilizations through history. And we have been taught that the soil is an empty container into which industrial nitrogen, phosphorus, potassium is put for fertility. That is not fertility, that's chemical pollution. Fertility comes from the billions of soil organisms. It's our duty to feed them so they can feed us. And my work over the last 30 years has been dedicated to resisting the privatization of the biological and intellectual commons through patents and intellectual property rights, through genetic engineering and appropriation of the processes of life's ability to reproduce, to multiply, to spread. The idea of patenting life is wrong to begin with because life is not an invention. A seed is not invented when a toxic gene is put into it. It is polluted. The claim that corporations can own life, and there are 5 corporations that are in the seed sector, they're the same companies that brought us chemical pollution, who are controlling the seed through patenting. They are controlling the seed through royalties, and royalty collection means our farmers are poorer. In poor countries like India, that debt can lead to suicide. Nearly 300,000 farmers in India have committed suicide because of indebtedness linked to seed monopolies, and seed monopolies linked to increased chemical dependence. The denial of the farmers of their right to their biodiversity and their knowledge is linked on the other end to the denial of consumers to their right to know. In Washington state, you tried to bring labeling on the ballot. Millions of dollars were poured in by the biotechnology industry and the junk food industry, which calls itself the grocery manufacturers. Together, they undermined democracy. Democracy is a commons because there is nothing like individual freedom for greedy corporations in an interconnected world where the fate of the seed is linked to the fate of the pollinator and the butterfly. It's linked to the fate of the earthworm and the soil organisms. It is linked to the fate of the farmer, and it is linked to the final eater in the food system, consumers. Sustainability is indivisible in a web of life, and sustainability is not separable from justice. That is why we have to defend with deep love and deep determination and deep courage our commons that guarantee life. In every law throughout history, the commons that supply life, whether it be the river that flows free, or it be the atmosphere, or it be the pasture and the forests, they were recognized as belonging to the community as a whole. It's in the commons we cultivate community. It's in the commons we learn how to be responsible together and how to derive our rights from that responsibility. I really do believe the hope for the future comes from hope for the commons, because with the commons is linked the recovery of democracy in a time where corporations are buying our democracy. You have experienced this in the United States with Citizens United and decisions that say corporations, which are a fiction on paper, abstract constructions, we first gave them personhood, and now we are giving them freedom of speech as the taking away of the freedom of speech of ordinary citizens. It's a deep political crisis. The commons is where we can resist it. The food system itself is in deep crisis when 5 companies control the seed, and when food-related diseases become so severe that the predictions are that autism is going to be condemning children, half the children of the United States, because of the links to both the chemicals and GMOs and all the toxics in our food. Just as much as half the children of India have been condemned to denial of food. Food is a commons. After all, food is what keeps the web of life going. The web of life is a food web. And a food web means it is shared by all species, but every human being has a right to food, just as every human being has a right to water. I feel so satisfied that over my 40 years of ecological activism, we've saved the forest of the Himalayas as a common through the Chipko movement. We saved the river Ganga as a commons when we stopped the privatization of Delhi's water supply imposed by the World Bank to benefit the world's biggest water corporation called Suez. We've managed to stop the patenting of seed in most places. We've managed to reclaim knowledge, our indigenous knowledge, in the case of neem, in the case of basmati, in the case of wheat. These were being patented through biopiracy. There's an attempt now to patent climate resilient crops. We have managed in India to have these patents rejected. What gives me hope is when we together can build the political force to stop the devastation and degradation of both our mindset as well as our lives. The kind of degradation that is inevitable when forces of concentration join for destructiveness, for condemning everyone to non-sustainability, to injustice, and to becoming privatized victims in a greedy landscape. The power of the corporations is huge. Their corruption is huge. Their threats and their bullying are huge. We've witnessed it across the world. But I think there is a bar bigger than that power. And that is the power of us working in collectivity, in cooperation, for a recovery and defense of our commons that is life in resilience and beauty and joy.